Yes, God exists, and this is why. The more I explore the cosmos, the more I believe in God. God does not exist just for a person who does not seek Him. If you seek Him, He will reveal Himself unto you. If you ask me, is there a God? I have to ask you first, do you really want to know? Because the answer can change your life. God can be found, but outside of our comfort zone. Our position about God's existence will influence how we organize everything in our lives. If God does not exist, then religious people focus their entire life on wrong goals and values. However, if God exists and someone denies His existence, he could miss the opportunity to live forever in a perfect world. Is the belief in God a waste of time, or does unbelief in God lead to an empty and purposeless life, which will end with eternal death? Before we make plans on how to live the rest of our lives, we should answer first the question of whether God exists or not. All people in the world are constantly facing the question about the existence of God in their lives. This is a question of our identity. Who are we? Where are we from? Where are we going? Do we exist just by chance, without a purpose, or do we have a Father who created us with a plan and purpose? Without answers to these questions, men can live their lives in fear and restlessness. On the other hand, the answers to these questions can bring inner peace and joy to our life.
Who is God?
People have different opinions about God's character traits. The three greatest monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, believe that in the Bible, God revealed the most important information He wants us to know about Him. It would not make sense if God exists, that He never talks to us. According to the Bible, God asked His prophets to write down His messages, so no one could distort His original message by oral tradition over time. Here's what God says about Himself in the Torah, the Old and the New Testaments, also known as Tavrat and Injil and Qur'an. God is an absolute, perfect, eternal, omniscient, omnipotent person, the only such, the one whose essence is love, who cares about everyone, at the same time merciful and just, incorruptible, that cannot be deceived, creator of the universe, redeemer and savior, the perfect designer. Everything depends on Him, and He does not depend on anyone, the infinite pure being, the one who is, who was, and who will be. God is a being without a cause of His existence. His essence is existence. He is eternal. God cannot be compared to anything, because He is the only God. There is no one like God. God moves everything in nature, and nothing in nature can influence Him. We cannot even imagine anything better than God, because He is absolute goodness. God is the one who is.
The origin of the idea of God, in our mind.
Nobody knows what is the origin of the idea of God, in the human mind. Wherever we find any kind of human settlement, there has always been some kind of religion. Human societies were religious in the past with no exception. Even in societies where religious people were severely persecuted, remaining religious people stayed devoted to God, even at the cost of death. The awareness of the existence of God is deeply rooted in human beings everywhere in the world. The question is, how did the idea of God's existence originate in the human mind? If a man has never met an all-powerful being who lives forever, and caused the existence of our world, it would be very difficult for him to imagine such a being. If we have never met an absolutely perfect being, how would all human societies develop at the same time, the idea of an omnipresent, perfect God? It appears that this idea came from outside of human civilization. We could have an idea of the omnipotent being, because God appeared to the first created couple and told them what He wanted us to know. We know that people invented Santa Claus, because they love gifts, but nobody actually believes that Santa Claus really exists. If people made up the idea of God, no one would believe in Him, except children until they grew up. People do not believe in Santa Claus, because they know that they have invented Him. But if a majority of people believe that God has existed throughout history, that would rather be an argument that people did not invent the idea of God. In the Bible, nothing is written as a myth, like a childish Santa Claus story. But instead, we find a narrative intended to be used as historical data, as a description of reality. If people invented God, then we would know when approximately the idea of God first appeared. Then religion would not be spread all over the world, but it would appear locally, and gradually would spread to places where people would refuse to believe in God. However, this is not what we find in history. Religion exists everywhere, in all cultures, throughout the history of the human race. If God does not exist, and if he never revealed himself to people, why would people still talk about him today and believe in him? Even if people do not talk about God, that would not be a proof that he does not exist. But if they do talk about him with certainty, that would not happen if people invented God. The fact that every person, at least sometimes, even negatively speaks about God, shows that the thought of God's existence is so deeply embedded in our minds that we cannot suppress that idea even in societies where religious people were cruelly persecuted. Many individuals refer to personal experience as an evidence of God's existence. In a hopeless situation with no way out, a person sent a prayer to God and asked him to do something which would be unlikely or impossible to happen, and a miracle really happened. Out of gratitude toward God who cared for them, people decided to obey God's principles and pray to God every day. Some people interpret the same facts as a coincidence, but a person with religious experience says, it could not happen without God's guidance. If life originated by pure chance, as atheists claim, those events would be an accidental match of circumstances, attributed to God's intervention. However, if there is a purpose behind the cause of an unusual development of events, it would require intelligent intervention to develop a series of unlikely events, someone with a plan and the power to do it. The likelihood something good will happen by accident is much smaller comparing to the likelihood something bad will happen. To do something good to someone requires energy and work to be invested. Behind good deeds, behind useful and purposeful things, we find an intelligent being, rather than pure chance. Coincidences, this is how people call events, when God anonymously helps someone.
How did our world come to existence?
How did matter come into existence, if God does not exist? The laws of physics say that in nature, matter cannot be destroyed or created. Imagine that there is nothing, neither matter, energy, or time. Nothing. At the moment when something needs to be created, a cause is necessary, someone who will initiate the existence of primordial matter and energy. Our world could not exist unless it was created by a cause. That does not have to be caused by anything, by someone who does not depend on matter and energy, someone outside of the created world. This original cause of matter and energy must be an intelligent being, rather than a random evolutionary process. If somehow a hand evolves, it is not possible it can exist and survive by itself successfully. It is necessary that brain develops at the same time, and also a center in the brain to be able to control the hand. And at the same time, there should be nerves to carry over information between brain and hand, plus muscles to move the hand, as instructed by the brain. And it requires healthy food, that will give energy to the brain and muscles, plus millions of other processes. All these processes must occur at the same time, in order for a person to survive, not one part by one, over millions of years of random recombination of the genes. The likelihood that a single cell is randomly formed, is practically equal to zero. If we look at statistical probability, and we are talking about billions of cells, combined into a complex creature such as a human being, which is as close to impossible as something can be. Accidentally in nature, only disorders, errors, imperfections, and diseases can occur. In order to create something functional, an intelligent creator is necessary, omniscient and all-encompassing, which will create matter from nothing, and engineer it, and shape it to become functional. How could impersonal nature, without an intellect, emotion, or willpower, create a man who has intellect, emotions, and the power of choice? Even human beings with all intellectual power cannot create a life, in spite of all intentions, but some people believe that blind chance did what the most intelligent person could not do, to create life.
Where did the order in the universe come from?
If our world is a product of the Big Bang, a random explosion, we would expect the universe to be in a chaotic state, as it would be after any other explosion. However, in the universe, we find the order, principles, rules and design, that indicate the use of technology so far ahead of human technology. Explosions do not create a design, but they destroy any design and order. An astronomer could never create a map of stars, by the accidental spraying of ink on paper. A map with the position of a star, must be the exact copy of the actual position of stars in the sky. The astronomer must invest a lot of effort and knowledge, to create a precise, useful map of stars. If it takes a lot of knowledge and work to create such a map, how much more knowledge and power is needed to create the enormous original in outer space? Real stars are in a three-dimensional space, they revolve around their axes, and one around the other and in galaxies. So it is much more complicated than a 2D picture on paper. The design in the universe points to a creative process of an extremely intelligent being, not to a random situation we can see after an explosion. Big Bang would not be able to direct the dead matter to organize and to be purposeful, and to become alive. No one ever observed creative explosions in nature, but only explosions that ruin existing order. From an atom in the microcosmos, to the infinity of the universe in the macrocosmos, we can see everywhere order and rules. As someone's house testifies that there is a house builder. Like a piece of cloth testifies there must be a weaver. As any chair testifies it must be created by a carpenter. So the world around us testifies about the creator of the world, God. Voltaire wrote about this issue. I cannot imagine how the clockwork of the universe can exist without a clockmaker. If there is a watch showing the exact time, it indicates that there is a watchmaker who created it. None of us would ever think that there is even a slight possibility, the slimmest chance, that a clock that shows precise time could be created by random processes or explosions. Just one protein is much more complicated than any watch, not to talk about a cell or the whole human body. The order in cells, in tissues and organs in our body points toward a design of an extremely intelligent and benevolent being. The order in the universe could not occur by chance. Accidental processes increase entropy, or system disorder, instead of creating the order. None of us expect that our property will improve and be more functional, if we leave it to blind chance and natural processes. With time passing by, our houses will collapse, if we do not repair spontaneous damages. Our car will break down. Dust will cover everything and it will fall apart. Our experience tells us that any order and design can appear, only if it is created by an intelligent person, because natural processes, according to the second law of thermodynamics, result in an increase of disorder and chaos. If we see harmony in nature, according to our everyday experience and observation of natural laws, we can easily conclude that harmony could be created only by the action of an extremely powerful and intelligent being. The order in the universe points to the fact that God stands behind the existence of endless space in the universe, matter, energy, and life.
Beauty in nature.
Beauty in nature is also a strong argument against atheism, because in nature we find beauty that does not have a purpose for survival, but only to be enjoyed by us. Some people said, Bach's music is a proof that God exists. Bach devoted to God everything he composed, and the beauty of his music by its inspiration points toward the existence of God. I know a person who came to believe that God exists when she understood the beauty of Bach's music. What is the purpose of beauty and art? Certainly not for the survival of human beings. Try to imagine our world without music. Such a world would be aesthetically very poor, because man needs the aesthetic experience of music and art in general. Life is not just a struggle for survival, but people also have spiritual needs. We know that beautifully colored poisonous mushrooms exist. These mushrooms are not edible. They are poisonous due to heavy metals in them. They do not smell nice, but it's a beautiful sight when we see them. Mushrooms do not have to be beautiful to reproduce, because for reproduction they use spores. Mushrooms do not need to attract insects with their beauty, because they do not reproduce by pollen. The only logical answer to why mushrooms are beautiful is that mushrooms are created for our aesthetic needs. Because in our brains we have centers to react with positive emotions when we recognize beauty. Even the greatest achievements of human technology cannot be compared to aesthetics in nature. People invest the enormous mental effort to create something beautiful. But we are told that some random event made nature more incomparably beautiful, by a blind chance. It would be very discouraging for a reasonable person that even the most intelligent people cannot surpass beauty made by random processes in nature. No computer can be as functional as a human mind, and at the same time our brain has such a beautiful outside design, resistant to shakes, diving in the water, and above all, it's alive. It would take a lot of faith to believe that all the beauty in nature has come into existence entirely by chance.
chance or no chance.
God does good things to us anonymously, because He does not want to brag, and people call a coincidence all those good things they receive from God. An intelligent being does not accept coincidence as a reasonable answer to all the problems in the world where we find meaning, purpose, cause and effect. If it is not God who created and organized billions of cells in the human organism, the only other option is a coincidence or pure chance. For example, how did the genetic code originate, a whole series of genes, in which our traits are written? The Egyptian hieroglyphs for a long time could not be interpreted. However, people have managed to understand the meaning of hieroglyphics, because these signs have some meaning. Hieroglyphics have meaning because they were written by intelligent beings, they were not created by chance. If the universe and life originated just by a coincidence, then we would not expect to find anything meaningful, but we still find very complex things that we can understand. There is no sense claiming that the genetic code originated by chance, when each of its complex parts is in its exact place and has a precise meaning. We can compare the cell with an electronic machine that can multiply itself, in order to create two new machines similar to the original, which can also continue reproduction to the next generation. When the machine breaks down, it can repair itself to a certain extent, as does our immune system. Intelligent people never produced a self-repairing TV that produces other TVs. And yet no one considers it to be rational to believe that a TV could come into existence accidentally. If a foreign body attacks a cell, the defense tools in the counterattack will automatically be turned on. Everything in our body is equipped to deal with hunger, thirst, cold, heat, or any other difficult condition. The human body is a remarkable machine. King David said, "I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." If everything around me came into existence accidentally, then my brain was also created by accidental combinations of chemical elements. Then people should doubt that their thoughts make any sense, because they might think that way, just by chance. While it's only their impression that they are smart. If my mind was created by chance, then I would not be certain of anything. So, we can conclude that someone more reasonable than us had to bring rational thoughts into our brains. Imagine driving a car and seeing a traffic sign at the end of the road, followed by a deep ditch. If someone thinks, it must be that wind accidentally placed a sign in that place, he could continue to drive. If random unintelligent processes rule nature, then we would have no reason to believe that the message sent by the accidental process is correct. The problem for an atheist is that they do not believe that the warning sign by the road was placed there with the intention to keep us safe, because at the end of the road there is indeed an abyss, as the sign shows. No gambler would ever bet on such a low probability, as it is for a complicated part of the human body, especially our brain, to come into existence by random processes. The likelihood that the world originated by random forces, statistically cannot be closer to zero. Atheism is like putting your life at risk by gambling, when for winning there is the lowest probability that can be imagined, for which any reasonable person would not give a dime.
Where did morality, conscience and shame come from?
If God does not exist, every immoral act would be allowed. Every society invites people to adhere to similar moral principles. Do not kill. Do not lie. Do not steal. Do not commit adultery. The principles based on the 10 God's commandments. These moral principles are mandatory, and laws require a punishment for offenders. When civilizations in the past abandoned these fundamental moral principles, by looting, killing others, or by sexual immorality, those civilizations collapsed, and another civilization appeared, and returned to the moral foundation described in God's commandments. As much as people reject these moral principles, their countries sooner or later become unstable. The existence of universal moral principles indicates that people have one creator who embedded these moral principles into us. These moral principles are the expression of God's character, a framework within which we can achieve the maximum of our positive potentials. Outside of that moral framework, people once ruined that perfection and now our lives go toward death. The root of all human conflicts is the different definitions of good and evil. This is precisely what God said that brought destruction to this planet in the beginning. God created for us a good world. But Adam and Eve wanted to find out what evil is. And they chose the opposite of what God told them to do. When people say they are good, that is because they change God's standards of good, and they declare their evil deeds to be acceptable and good. God is an absolute moral being, is not indifferent to the violation of moral principles, and he says that death comes as a consequence of changing moral standards. God's moral was never based on the fact that he is almighty, that he has absolute power over all creatures in the universe. He did not execute the death sentence as soon as people committed their sins, but he gave us a possibility of repentance. However, all people have violated God's moral principles at some point in their lives, which separate us from God as a source of life, and leads us toward death. The ultimate sentence, eternal life or eternal death, will be executed at the time of Christ's second coming, on God's day of judgment. Modern philosophers and sociologists have abandoned the idea that morality is a relative term and that we can have our personal moral standards that are not more right or wrong than anyone else's. If we are not delusional, we all agree that it is immoral to kill a man or rob him, or to harass children. So we do have absolute standards to judge anyone for these crimes regardless of their personal standard of morality. Objecting to cannibalism, or mass murders in a gas chamber, is an objective, universal moral value, and cannot be relativized. Both atheists and religious people at the beginning feel a guilty conscience and shame when they are caught doing the opposite of universal moral principles. If people continue to violate these principles, after a while, they will stop feeling reminders from their conscience, and they will become insensitive to the injustice of the suffering of others. Human beings have feelings of guilt and shame already as children, to distinguish between good and evil, regardless of their culture, education and customs. It appears that this moral skeleton is embedded in us at the time of the creation of the world.
Can we know all about God?
Instead of complaining about why God did not reveal to us everything about him, people should thank him for revealing this much. If it is difficult to understand God, that does not mean that he does not exist, and it is understandable why we do not understand God, knowing his greatness and our limits. If God is small enough for people to understand, then people would argue that God is not big enough to worship. We do not understand God because of limited mental abilities about a complex being, such as God. Even religious people say they do not know everything about God. Atheists complain that we cannot believe in someone who is a mystery for us, someone whom we do not understand. However, when we have a headache, we do not need to know every detail of head anatomy to know that we have a headache. We are still able to locate the pain. We do not know which physical and biochemical processes are happening in our heads, but we know that we have a headache. Likewise, if experience tells us that God exists, it is not necessary for us to know everything about God to know that God exists. We do not know how gravity works. We have never seen a magnetic field, energy or electrons, but we see how they affect the world. We do not know precisely how to define the substance of love, yet we use the word love, and we know exactly whether we see love or not. People would like to put God under a microscope, as a specimen in a laboratory, to confirm that he exists. People would like to look at God as a being equal to us, even though it is difficult to imagine for us how complex God's personality is, and beyond our ability to understand. God can observe a scientist, but a scientist can only perceive a small fraction of what God is. The main problem for human beings is not an intellectual problem, it is not a problem of knowledge or ignorance, but of moral decisions. With the increase of knowledge and technology, human beings are prouder, and see themselves as great and above everyone in nature. In spite of all their intellectual abilities, people still smoke tobacco, drink alcohol, use drugs and do many other things that eventually kill them. The main problem for human beings is not what they still don't know, but what they do even when they find out it is bad for them. People know which food is unhealthy, but they still eat unhealthily. So, we do not need to know everything about God. It is enough to know what he revealed to us about himself in the Bible. God knows what's important for us to know about him, and what he is not. It will not help us to know technically how God can be present everywhere, if we lie, steal, hate, live unhealthily, become sick and die. It's much more important for us to find out what kind of cure God intended for us, so we stop doing what's bad for us and the people around us, so he can resurrect us on his judgment day.
What does the majority think?
The question is, can we use democracy, what the majority believe, to decide whether God exists or not? The opinion of the majority cannot change the facts. For example, a majority can decide that the sky is not blue today, but the sky will still be blue. Likewise, the opinion of the majority cannot change the fact of whether God exists or not. Anyway, the majority of people on our planet believe in some kind of deity. A minority, atheists, say this is because the majority is uneducated, while in their opinion, all educated people do not believe in God. However, we know that there are organizations whose members are educated people at the university level who believe in God. A lot of people with academic titles are afraid to say that they are religious because of the repression atheists have done in the past to their religious colleagues. We know that even highly educated people do not know everything, and they were wrong so many times in the past, but they still aggressively defended their positions. Therefore, the criterion must be what is true, and not what some people think is true. History is full of misconceptions that educated people believe as true in the past.
Can I be certain that God exists?
God could very easily remove our every dilemma about his existence, if he should appear before us. However, this would force people who do not want to live by God's commandments, to pretend to live according to God's commandments. But in secret they would continue to break the law. Even if they see God, most people would obey him only to avoid punishment. But the number of true believers would remain the same. This way, God left us a freedom of choice. He gave us enough rational arguments in favor of his existence. But he did not give us absolute proof of his existence, and he did not remove any doubt. So atheists do not need to pretend to be religious. On the other hand, there is no absolute proof either that God does not exist. Nobody can prove that God does not exist, or if it is logically impossible for God to exist. It is also not possible to give an absolute proof that the Big Bang happened a few billion years ago, because no one was able to observe it, nor could anyone create an experiment to repeat the Big Bang. Atheists do not have any idea how original matter and energy appeared before the so-called explosion of the Big Bang, because matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. Therefore, an atheist must believe that matter created itself from nothing, even though the laws in nature tell us it cannot happen spontaneously, without the intervention of an intelligent being. Therefore, the life of an atheist is also based on beliefs, not on evidence. It is strange that atheists seek an absolute proof to believe that God exists. But on the other hand, they do not seek an absolute evidence for the spontaneous creation of matter and energy, or the appearance of life from inorganic, dead matter. If we were to find one weak point of atheism, which is denial of God, or theism, which is belief in God, this would not be an absolute confirmation that the other side must be right. When we consider arguments for the two opposite belief systems, we need to estimate the strength of these arguments, to see which of these two paradigms better fits the facts, instead of choosing according to our prejudices. We should always bear in mind the limitations of our brains, and our five senses that often lead us to a wrong conclusion.
What atheists believe?
Human societies become so unreasonable that people believe that God is dead, and that Elvis is alive. Simply said, this is what atheists believe about the creation of the world. Atheism is a belief that there was nothing, and then to nothing happened something, which caused nothing to explode for no reason. So nothing created everything that exists. Then everything magically arranged itself without any reason into something invisible to the naked eye. Unbelievably complicated living cells which are able to multiply themselves. So finally human beings are formed. We should be honest and ask ourselves if this sounds logical. It might be that atheists are ready to die for what they believe, but since they do not believe in anything, they are not willing to die for what they believe. An atheist does not know where he is going, but he is stubborn to stay on his path. Some people are atheists because they protest against corruption in religious organizations. Some because they do not like the morality God presented as only correct behavior. Some because they are taught in school not to believe. And some people are atheists because they do not want others to laugh at them. Atheists constantly attack religious people, in a very aggressive way. Psychologists said religion was a desire to have some noble origin, or because of fears of natural phenomena, poor relationship with parents. On the other side, religious psychologists did psychoanalysis of Freud, and concluded that Freud had a bad attitude toward his father. And instead of intending to kill his earthly father, he decided to revenge himself to the Heavenly Father. Freud, Feuerbach, Marx and Nietzsche criticize the wrong motives some religious people and organizations have. It is true that some people really believe in God because of guilt, fear of punishment, inability to solve their problems, because of the misunderstanding of natural disasters and phenomena, because some people manipulated them to take their money, or invented gods with similar flaws and imperfections as their own. However, this does not mean that all religious people are like that. There are people with the right motives for their beliefs. They have logical arguments for their beliefs, and they will not deny God even if threatened to be killed. Instead of looking only for corrupted religion, communists and Karl Marx could see honest people who believe in God for no personal gain, who successfully live their lives, and he could take this as evidence of the existence of God. Instead, Marx and the communists chose atheism, not because of irrefutable arguments that God does not exist, but because they chose not to believe. God will not cease to exist if there are people who represent him in a wrong way. All these criticisms are not related to God's existence, but to human distortion of religion. Atheists don't even consider being honest, because they do not believe there is a God who created a universal moral that requires us to be honest.
Karl Marx said, "Religion is the opium of the people, which does not let us enjoy life, here and now."
Marx predicted religion would disappear as a human product and false phenomenon, that churches would become museums, because he believed that God does not exist.
Today we see the opposite.
All societies in the world rejected Marx's ideas, because atheism led them to economic collapse and devaluation of human beings, while religious people still attend worship services. Although the world rejected communism, they liked his atheism and still his ideas even though he impoverished 1/3 of the human population on this planet. We could state that people believe in God for psychological motives, only if we are 100% certain that God does not exist. Psychological explanations are not necessary for true claims. For example, 2 + 2 = 4, or that the sun is round. Nobody has unconscious wrong motives for believing these statements, because they are true. So, if people believe in God because he really exists, then psychological explanations are redundant. In times of trouble, the number of atheists drastically decreases. Atheists do not believe in God, but they are afraid of him. At the time of God's judgment, there will be no atheists. God can hurt you with the truth, but he will never comfort you with lies. Every person on this planet should understand 2 things. 1, God exists.
And 2, he is not you.
If someone does not believe that God exists, his unbelief cannot make God disappear. God does not believe in atheists, which means that atheists will not exist forever. If you spit into the sky toward God, it will fall on your face. Man cannot diminish God's glory by refusing to adore him, the same way as an unreasonable man cannot shut down the sunlight by writing the word darkness on the wall of his house. A man without God feels like a child without a parent.
Are the negatives in religion proof against the existence of God?
The majority of excuses for atheism, people find in religious hypocrites that misrepresent God. Trusting God cannot be replaced by trusting some religious organization, or religious leaders. Atheists not only say that God does not exist, but religion has bad consequences for society. The Inquisition tortured people, burned them at the stake, and sent people to so-called holy wars, crusades, and jihad. Militant fundamentalists cause more and more victims, and some religions approve of immorality, drug abuse, and even collective suicide. Cooperation of church and state always brought serious consequences in the past. It is true that some so-called believers use religion for their personal gain, to earn money, to rule over people, etc. Even some religious leaders attacked basic doctrines God gave us in the Bible about God's commandments, or the creation time frame, even though they should defend them. On the other hand, the same objection also stands for atheism, whose philosophy was responsible for revolutions, with millions persecuted or killed, because it is based on the evolutionary model of survival of the fittest. The best argument against religion are religious people, obviously, the ones who do not live according to God's principles. Also, the strongest argument for religion is also religious people, the ones who live according to God's principles and reflect God's character.
The question is, why some people believe that scandals religious people are involved in can deny God's existence, while the pure life of prophets and apostles they do not see as a confirmation of God's existence.
Obviously, God allowed corrupted religious people to give an excuse for unbelief to those who do not want the truth. We know that people print counterfeit money because they imitate the value of real money. If God does not exist, or there is no value in true religion, it would be useless to create false religions. The existence of false believers and false gods confirms not only the existence of God, but that his value is recognized as worth the risk of creating a counterfeit.
What God is.
Under the term God, different people think about different things. Some think that God is cosmic energy. Some think that God is nature. And some think that God is a person. Common for all of them is that they all say, "I believe in God." The differences are so big that it is obvious that everyone cannot be correct because they believe the opposite of the other side. The only so-called gods people would make up are typical pagan gods who fight, quarrel, commit adulteries, do every evil, as people do. Human beings with carnal tendencies would never invent an absolutely good God to rebuke them all the time. In Eastern religions, they do not believe that Satan exists, but they believe their God is good and evil at the same time. If God cannot cure himself of evil, we could not expect that he would be able to sanctify us and remove evil from us. The only God we would need is the one who can remove evil from us. The God who created the perfect world in the beginning, the God who is perfect himself. It is not difficult to figure out who would like to portray God as evil and convince people not to trust him. Go through all mythologies, and you will not find God who is absolutely good and perfect. The true God is not anthropomorphic, which means that men did not invent God according to human characteristics. What God wants is to create men to be theomorphic, which means to be willing to strive for perfect justice, truth and love. The true God is looking for such people. A man who likes to steal, lie, commit adultery and kill would never invent a God who loves us, who is righteous, always tells the truth, and reminds us that we need to change if we want him to keep us alive.
People who are attracted by immoral behavior would never accept to believe in some fictional, good God.
They would rather want to erase from their minds, and from the society, any reminders of a biblical God. People have no interest in inventing a God who is perfectly just, kind, and loving. The perfect God must be real, because somehow, he imprinted into our minds the idea of his existence, his righteousness and his principles. The perfect God invites us to be like him. We can't find the perfect God in Eastern or other religions, only in the Bible.
The majority of ancient nations believed that there were a multitude of gods, not just one God. They would rather look for a religion that does not rebuke their sinful desires, instead of God, with the highest standards of morality.
If all nations around were polytheists, where did the Israelites learn that there is only one God?
The idea of monotheism,
the existence of only one God, people would accept, only if they could not deny that the true God revealed himself to them.
as a proof for the unwillingness people have to accept the only one perfect God.
We see that some Israelites throughout history abandoned monotheistic principles and returned to the immoral customs of multiple so-called gods. They even asked for a king to rule over them instead of God, that we also may be like all the nations. Jewish monotheism was something different from any of the other nations, something carnal men would not like gladly to accept. It is a question of how these nomadic tribes, descendants of Jacob, 35 centuries ago resisted polytheism, which seems much more attractive for sinners. Everywhere around them, people adored the elements of nature, the sun and moon, even animals, or an emperor who claimed to be a god. But a small, insignificant nation said that all this was idolatry. Instead of worshipping idols of wood, stone or metal, the Israelites said,
"But, will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven, and heaven of heavens, cannot contain you, how much less this house that I have built?"
There are many different ways that people try to describe God. But the only correct way would be how God described himself. He decided those descriptions to be written in the Bible, to prevent people to misinterpret or misunderstand him.
What if God does not exist?
Without God, the world would be a labyrinth, without an exit. If God does not exist, and everyone is allowed to do whatever he wants, this world would be a horrible place to live in. Atheists would implement their so-called morality, based on survival of the strongest and fittest, without mercy for the weak. If there were no God, why should anyone care about other people? The other people would be our rivals, competitors we needed to overcome, in order to survive. If no one believes in God, there will be no justice, no love, no goodness or compassion.
Run away from a man who is not afraid of God, and from a man who has no shame.
If there is no God, our life would be meaningless. The meaning of life cannot be found in accidental chemical reactions and processes.
After we die, everything we did would be futile, because if our life ultimately ends forever when we die, our disappearance would make everything pointless. The meaning of life exists only when we realize that God created us with a purpose, and when we find and fulfill that purpose.
Can people be good without God?
People are trying to be good. But sooner or later, we come back to imperfection. Do you know anyone who managed to be absolutely good without God? An atheist can be good, only if he changes the meaning of the word good. If things God calls bad, they call good. For some atheists, Stalin was a good man, even though almost everyone will agree, he was a mass murderer of mostly innocent people, whom he perceived as a threat to his survival. Communism failed, because people do not want to give up their selfish interests to do good to others, as God told us to do. Even if any false religion should govern society, it would not substantially change people, since they also compromise justice for a personal gain.
On the other side, can anyone say that Jesus Christ was not good?
The perfect life of Jesus Christ is another argument for the existence of God. People spend all their lives chasing money, looking for personal gain. But Christ sacrificed himself to save his enemies, even atheists, if they choose to return to God. Such high moral standards, and such kindness, cannot be seen among people who deny God's existence. Jesus himself said, people would not believe God, even when he resurrected and brought out a man from death, as they do not believe in spite of Christ's resurrection, seen by more than 500 people. If a man chooses to trust God, Jesus said, that he will listen to Moses and the prophets, whose words are written in the Bible.
What if God exists?
So, there are only 4 options. 1. God does not exist, and you do not believe in him. 2. God does not exist, and you believe in him. 3. God exists, and you do not believe in him. 4. God exists, and you believe.
Only one of these 4 possibilities has the promise of a huge reward, eternal life. Whoever trusts in God cannot lose it. And whoever does not believe that God exists cannot get it.
Before we jump into the dark, we need to know whether the rescue nets are stretched below us. God does not depend on mine or your existence, or on the existence of any other man, but our lives depend on God's existence. God without a man is still God. A man without God is nothing. The one who does not believe in God must believe a lot of illogical things. Faith is not a belief that God exists, but trust in God, the confidence that God's principles are just and the best choice for us. One of the arguments that God exists is that he placed a secret spot in every human heart that only he can fill. If we put anything else in that place instead of God, we will be anxious, restless, dissatisfied, nervous, and stressed. Only when we trust God and decide to live according to his principles, the spot in our heart is filled properly, and we receive an inner peace that only God can give.
I do not know what the future brings, but I know who brings the future. When God is the only thing that remains, we realize that he is enough for us.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. God's hands are wide open, 24/7. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Be online with God all 7 days, because he gives technical support, his line is never busy, and you have unlimited access right now. Since God created our planet and solar system in just 6 days, imagine what he can create in you during all your life. I would rather go with God against people, instead of going with people against God.